Are you feeling bad about yourself because you get distracted so quickly? Do you have a chaotic mind that jumps from ID to ID, finding it very difficult to focus, difficult to get things done? Or do you feel like a slow computer user compared to others who look like hackers with all their terminal and shortcut skills and hardly ever using the mouse? Or do you feel learning all these skills to make you go faster is a very heavy investment? It's too costly? I'm here to tell and show you that it's worth it. The investment for many of the productivity improvements is actually not that big. But above all, it will make you a happier computer user. This may sound silly, but happiness is what causes greater productivity. Telling yourself to just work harder and to just focus is not actually sustainable. It's not going to work. Let's look at 7 tools for greater productivity. My first productivity tip is a window manager, specifically if you're on a Mac, Rectangle. It's free and open source. It is a window manager that helps you keep your windows organized with very little time investment. You learn 3 or 4 shortcuts and that's it. Now you're a lot faster organizing your windows using maximum real estate of your screen. Having a side-by-side view of 2 apps can be very valuable depending on the thing you are doing, especially if you don't have multiple screens on your computer. But even if you do you have a shortcut to quickly move a window to another screen, maximize it over there, something like that? Nothing is faster than a shortcut here, and dragging across different windows is a very slow activity. But the goal is not only speed, the goal is getting rid of repetitive things, of you dragging your mouse to that other screen, getting that window exactly where you want it. Slightly frustrating you if you don't get it where you want to, because a mouse is less precise and as a shortcut will just maximize the window for you in an instant. Rectangle just has some shortcuts to align your windows side by side, for example. These 2 shortcuts will do so. Or a shortcut to maximize it all. But if you don't have a Mac, don't worry, there's free and open source alternatives for every operating system out there. My second tip is using the terminal with a window manager. Specifically, I use iTerm2 and I use stmux. Now, I won't make this a video about the advantages of a terminal. The terminal is great, it will make you faster for many different tasks, but that's a whole topic on its own. I personally picked iTerm because it has a natural text editing, so I have jump words, shortcuts, stuff like that. Let me show you. What if I were to cd into a specific directory? Now I can use Option arrow to jump words. These shortcuts make me a lot quicker in what I do, but more importantly, they take away frustration. If I've typed out this long command and I need to press the arrow and wait for the cursor to be at the other side of the line, I'm dying a little on the inside, and I don't want that. Again, the point is not to use iTerm. The point is to find a terminal that takes the frustration away, that makes you quicker. And stmux is basically a window manager for the terminal. The same for normal Windows. Why wouldn't you have the output of your unit test and your build errors side by side? You can see them both at the same time. They don't need full screen, especially with these massive screens that we have now. Switching windows takes more time than simply moving your eyes from one side to the other side. So let me show you an example I've shown in a previous video as well. I have an stmux command in my package.json so that I can share it with other colleagues as well. If I run npm run dev, then it'll start up all these things. And of course Cypress as well, but I'll kill that one. Now I have 3 windows that it does side by side in a specific configuration. This isn't automatic. I have set 1/3, 2/3, 2/3, 1/3 so that it will actually lay out it in this specific way. I can click on these windows, it has some mouse functionality. It is all in the terminal, but you do need a smart terminal to support this kind of thing. As in iTerm, it was very easy to turn on scroll for these kind of windows, and now it's supported. This isn't supported in every terminal emulator. I can activate a window, that means the borders are green. I can run commands, like what can I do? This is H for help, A for rerunning the test, for vtest specifically. This just makes my life a lot easier. And now if I command tab to the Visual Studio Code, I have my build output, I make an error, I see this output in the build as well. So I know, of course, my tests are failing, but that's not because I made a wrong test or whatever, it's because there's a build error. Now, stmux has a fairly simple shortcut key schema. You can get everything out there with Ctrl+A question mark. Ctrl+A is the default modifier key. You can change that to whatever modifier you want, but it's basically a modifier and then the command you want to give to stmux, because otherwise it's going to send your keystroke to the window that you have active, of course, because what if you want to do that? So Ctrl+A K for killing the entire thing. The syntax for stmux is really easy. You're basically using these brackets. So I'm telling, hey, give me the numbers and make the mouse work. And then I use these brackets to say, I want this nested inside this larger thing, and I want this part to be 1/3 of the width, and therefore automatically this is going to be 2/3 of the width. You have these dots for putting things side by side, and the colon for putting them on top of each other. It's relatively easy to learn, and it's called the simple tmux, terminal multiplexer. So stmux is a play on tmux, the old Linux, Unix BSD tool even maybe. And tmux is a really complex, large tool that it took me a while to learn. And when I found stmux, I was really happy because I could just, commit this stuff into my package.json, share it with colleagues, and it's a one-liner. That's super obvious. And the third productivity tool that I want to talk about is Notion. Notion for me started out as a note-taking system. I just wanted to jot down some notes, some to-do lists, stuff like that, so that I could get back to it later, that I won't forget, so that I could start the day fresh with exactly where I left off yesterday. But Notion is so much more than that. It turned out to be a documentation system. It turned out a way to build my second brain. Brains are really good at having ideas, but brains are really bad at storing ideas. We don't have exact memory. Our brain is not like a hard disk. And because of that, it's really good to start writing down things so that you don't forget them, or that you only half remember them. So one of the first things I started using Notion for is a quick capture. One of my first pages in Notion is called Quick Capture, and it's just one tiny document that every time I have an ID and I'm doing something else, I'm on a bike, I'm having lunch, it doesn't matter what I'm doing, the moment I have an ID, I immediately put it down in the Quick Capture, like one sentence or just a few words so that I'll remember it by, and then I'll go back to whatever I was doing. And then at some other time, I'll process these quick actions into, okay, now it needs to become a task for this project over here, or now this is a video ID that I have for my YouTube, or whatever it turns out to be. I can process these things, so I empty this quick capture list again. Notion starts out as a note-taking system with files, and you can put them into folders, you can give them nice names, you have a document, which is like a small article, just space to write text, or you can put images or videos or whatever you want to do there, and it is rich text, as in Markdown as well. So you can really scale that kind of note-taking system in Notion, but it is more. You can create these, what they call databases in there, and you can have various views on them. Do you want these sort of column views, like planning these roadmap things? Do you want to turn it into timelines? Do you want to create a wiki with your entire engineering department? Documentation, there's these project supports, which are all different views on databases. It has boards, it has tables, all kinds of different things. It's worth checking out Notion just because it is so powerful. One of the things I've recommended before in my videos on time management is to log all your meetings. Is to basically, every time you have a meeting, every time, whether that's a formal meeting in a meeting room with your colleagues and names and titles and preparations, or is just a meeting that you have at a coffee machine, it's also a meeting for me. Every time you have had a meeting or you are having a meeting, you need to generate raw data. You need to start writing down things so that you remember what you spoke of. And if it's a meeting at a coffee machine, obviously I'm not gonna type on my phone or whatever. By the way, Notion has a phone client. But in a meeting I will second screen sometimes to jot down the IDs and the things I hear that I want to capture. If somebody is saying something and I need to get back to that a week from now, my brain will not function this way. I won't remember exactly what was said, and especially I won't remember a nice overview of everything that was said. So I'll have a blurred picture of the reality. To be exact about it, I'm generating during this meeting, I'm just jotting down things, just on this sort of raw format, so it's just notes. And then later on, I need to process this raw data that I've generated. I need to turn it into actions and insights. Actions, things I need to do later because I need to follow up. It is now an ID that we have. So how do we actually implement this? I need to talk to these people. I need to send this email. I need to do whatever I need to do. So I turn them into actions. I put them in an agenda or in another to-do list that I have for a specific day. So I put a time on it so that I know when I'll work on it and I know it will actually happen. Or into insights, which maybe I can put in some other documentation section in Notion. Like every time I think about this specific topic, yeah, I had this insight. Now that I've read all my it's actually important that we also pay attention to this and this. And I have not been paying attention to this in the past. So I'm going to explicitly write it down so that I truly create my understanding around this topic. So logging meetings is about generating raw data and processing that raw data into actions and insights. Another thing that Notion is obviously capable of is to-do lists. I do recommend to be careful with using to-do lists. I don't use them myself anymore. I have used them in the past, but the trick is to start as soon as you add an item to the to-do list to also either process it later, the same with the quick capture or the logging meetings thing, or to immediately attach I will do it at that point, date and time. If you attach the date and time to it, then you commit to this is when I will start doing this to-do. If you don't, you quite quickly, quite easily, will have this to-do list that is only growing. And you need to have a to-do list that stays small. If your to-do list is beyond 10 items, then you can basically forget doing everything. So if you want to do things that you're committing to, then only add it to the to-do list if you can also schedule it in some point in your agenda. If you don't want to schedule it, or it turns out you cannot schedule it because your agenda is too full or whatever's going on, then that's a hint that maybe this isn't that important. So you still need to have a process in place where you say this is only urgent but not actually important, so I'm not going to do that. And this is actually important. It's not urgent at all, but that doesn't matter. It's important, so I need to do it. And having this kind of way of thinking about things changes your way, changes your thinking around to-do lists, and I stopped using them completely. See my video on time management if you want to learn more about how to prioritize tasks, which is, I think, more important than having a to-do list, having a place to write down your to-dos. Another thing I use Notion for is building a second brain. This idea comes from a book from Tiago Forte, where you just start using your brain for having ideas and you stop using it for storing ideas. Every time you tell yourself, I need to remember this, you should not try to remember this, but you should write it down. Whenever I learn something new, I have this section in my Notion which I call articles, where every time I come across something in life that I want to remember, that I want to investigate further, that I want to start doing as well, I need to find a way to write it down. I need to take some time to learn about it, to make some notes about it, and to write it down in an article. So I write articles for myself, and sometimes I do publish them, but mostly for myself. That's how it starts. So that I learn this new skill, I write some notes around it, and then I have really learned the skill. And if I forget about it, I can just know to go back to the article section, read about it, scan it in 5 seconds, and then, yeah, there it is again. Suddenly it's back in my head and I can start using it. A few examples of this. I came across this decision model a while back. There's 4 ways to communicate a decision. Do you want to give a command? Like, we are merging the teams. What do you need to get on board? Do you want to give a proposal? We are merging the teams. Do you see any things that we missed which would make this impossible? Or a suggestion. We want to merge the teams. What do you think? Or do you have an idea? We need to improve collaboration. We're open for anything. What do you think about merging the teams? And this different way of communicating things is something I wanted to apply later in my career, which I wanted to learn about. I wanted to write it down so I wouldn't forget about it, so that I can get back to it. Once I get into a situation in the future where I need to communicate some decision, or I'm advising somebody else to communicate a decision, now I can get back to this and I can think, clearly let's put it over here and not over here, making it a way more conscious decision on how to communicate things, how you want to collaborate. Another example is a backend for frontend article. At some point I've used this pattern for quite a while, but at some point I started to write notes about it because I started getting into discussions where I didn't know whether it was a good idea or a bad idea in these specific scenarios. It's not always black and white. There's a lot of gray area for these kind of architectural decisions. So I wanted to have a full overview of which arguments are a good idea at what point and when they're not, and what are the advantages and disadvantages. So I started to list all the whys and the why nots and what you're actually doing and how and these sources, and because there's so many articles on the internet that specify this, but there's not a good overview of everything. None of them is the one source of truth for backend for frontend. So I made my own source of truth internally. And then, because I didn't invent anything new, I didn't dare publish it. And then at some point I thought, okay, let's publish it anyway. So I published it on my website. None of these are my ideas, just an article that is a useful overview. I'm explaining why, what, why not, everything, and I'm linking to all the sources that I used. So this way of working turned into a way of creating knowledge for myself. Another example is the spectrum of goals, spectrum of control article that I found on Ali Abdaal's website. He has a longer article, I think, over there. I don't remember whether I wrote this myself or not. It's been a year, I see even. I think I copied most of this stuff. It's an easy way for me to get back to this knowledge. If I am talking about goals with somebody, I can just quickly search for, oh yeah, there was a few different types of goals. You have input, output, and outcome goals. How do you want to set this goal? Another example, I took a Stoicism masterclass on Skillshare at some point, and I wrote down everything I learned from it that I really found important to jot down, to get back to. Every time I need to sort of find a way to deal with a specific situation that I have, maybe where my emotions get the better of me, then I find a way to get back to this by knowing this is where I'm going to read. I'm going to read these notes again. I'm going to back into this mindset that I had, you know, a year ago or whatever when I did this. And you know, I can learn this dichotomy of control again. I can learn about the circles of concern, these notes. I've also read The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey a while back. And this is, I think, a section from that book. Another example is a talk I saw on Lead Dev Together, the conference / training, I guess, that you do. Lead Dev is a conference and Lead Dev Together is the training section that you can do. So there was this thing about strategy and I really liked it. So I turned it into a sort of article. It's not really an article, it's still notes, but it's good to be aware of this. After this, I also read this book on good strategy, bad strategy, how strategy is diagnosis, vision, plan. And remembering this stuff, I'm never gonna remember it all this vividly. So writing it down, again, it gives me a way to get back to it. I'm gonna stop with the examples now because otherwise this video is gonna get way too long. But the point is that Notion scales really well with whatever you wanna put into it. I have quite a big second brain right now. It's very difficult for me to oversell Notion. And my fourth productivity tool is a timer. Any timer will do. A timer is a really important productivity tool. It doesn't matter whether you use your phone, your smartwatch, your an app, a website, it doesn't really matter. I really love the Pomodoro technique to get into a zone where I can fully focus, and a timer to set a sustainable pace where I actually take breaks at the right time makes me really focus. It helps me to really get things done. If I completely zone in for 4 hours, then I'll be drained and I need to go to bed afterwards. But if I take these blocks of 20 minutes, 25 minutes with 5 minutes or 10 minutes in between, what the Pomodoro technique is, it will really keep it sustainable for me. I can do work for a full day and it's not going to drain me. The Pomodoro technique is 3 blocks of 25 minutes of work with 5 minutes or 10 minutes in between as a break. And then after you've had 3 blocks, you take a longer break, like 20 or 30 minutes, for example. And you can loop this. You have to make sure that you set a timer for these 20 or 25 minutes of work, because if you don't, then you'll not stop working. And the way to really keep the focus is to have a walk for 5 minutes in between these blocks of work. And that's what I literally do. These breaks, they get me into focus and they keep it all sustainable. After 25 minutes of sitting at my desk and having a focus block, the bell rings. I literally have an app that gives me a bell. And then I get up and I go, I don't know, clean the kitchen, or I go for a really short walk outside or across the house. It doesn't really matter. Into your garden. But make sure you get up, you clear your brain, you do something else. And then after these 5 or 10 minutes are gone, then you'll be back at your desk, setting the timer for another 25 minutes and focusing on the work, minimizing distractions while you're at it. Besides your phone, your smartwatch, or whatever you have, there's a lot of free tools and apps available that you can just use. I like the Pomodoro app, not sure how you pronounce this, Pomodoro, where you just simply press the play button and it will start to run the timer for you, and it will ring a bell, audible, whether you're on this tab or not, it works. There's some settings if you want to play with the work duration, break duration, or longer break duration, how many rounds you want to have, what kind of notification that you want to have. Some basic stuff, but it might help you that you can just keep pressing play or it will run automatically. You can use a timer for it as well. I sometimes, especially if I walk away, I put my smartwatch on and then, you know, if I'm gonna clean the kitchen for 5 or 10 minutes between my work blocks, then I want to have a timer that I hear somewhere. And if my computer's on the other side or on a different floor, then I won't hear it. So whatever works for you, really. There's a lot of apps out there. If you don't like whatever's there, then it might be a nice side project to build your own. Or don't, and just use your phone. It's fine. My next productivity tip is having a coding playground or a REPL available. The idea of a REPL is ancient, and I learned about it when I learned about Lisp. A REPL is basically a playground where you can run single lines or snippets of code without them necessarily being in the context of your project. In Lisp, you can choose to have them in the context of your project, but you have the power to choose. Now, a true REPL is much more powerful than this, but most of us, of course, aren't using Lisp nowadays. So let's look at the modern REPLs, and let's look at the websites that make this available for you. I like to have this playground available when I'm coding. It is something that is outside of my editor. So if I'm coding something in Visual Studio Code, I'm running into a problem and I want to solve this problem, but I want to solve it isolated. Then maybe I'll write this one function somewhere else without the context of the project. And then once I have got it far enough, then I'll move it back into the project. Now I have to say one note that the more I use test-driven development in my workflow, the more my tests force me to write isolated files as well, isolated code as well. So the less I actually use this REPL or this playground, because TDD sort of replaces it. It creates a different form of isolation, but a playground is still useful to have. There's things like JS Fiddle or CodePen. There's also REPLit.com. There's many ways of writing code and getting the answer in some console out there really quickly. You still have your autocomplete in this editor, you still have your syntax highlighting, so it feels like an editor, but it isn't your full IDE and it doesn't have your project context. If your unit tests run really slow, if your code base is massive, if every time you include something you have all these globals that interfere with things, there may be reasons, these are anti-patterns, but there may be reasons you want to pull it out of the context of the project and try it out somewhere else. And these things are really good for these kind of topics. If you look at JS Fiddle and CodePen, they're more focused around front-end development. So they have HTML, CSS, JavaScript editors, even if you don't use them. They have these nice features where you can make them look like you want them to look. I've used these in the past. This thing is 5 or more years old. When I needed to solve this intersection problem, I needed to have a function that gave me a true or false on whether it is intersecting. I was writing this is intersecting function, and I didn't want to do this in the entire context of my React app back then because it slowed me down. My next tip is whiteboarding. Quickly drawing things whenever you need it is a very useful skill and behavior to have. I use it a lot as a conversation assistant. When I'm trying to explain something, I'm gonna just quickly draw to explain, but this is separate from that, and maybe there's an arrow in between there, maybe not. But explaining concepts in whatever way you want to do it, whether that's writing stickies, whether that's drawing boxes with arrows, boxes inside of other boxes to explain different relationships, to explain order. There's so many things that you start to infer from looking at something visual. Or when I need to organize my thoughts visually for myself, I'm trying to solve a specific problem. It deepens my understanding if I'm actually drawing. There's a few tools out there. I'll talk about Excalidraw, TLDraw, you have Miro, and you have FigJam. So Miro and FigJam require an account and probably a subscription. I'm not going to go into that one. TLDraw and Excalidraw are really local tools that you can still use for collaboration. Everything is saved locally. Let's draw something in Excalidraw. I have a front-end UI here. I have a backend or BFF here. Then I'm gonna need some arrows in between. Then I have a database or something. I don't know. Database over here. I want to press 5 so that I can draw an arrow from here to there. Then I want to draw an arrow. No, maybe another backend service 1, service 2. This service connects to a database. This service does not. And I really quickly start to get the hang of these shortcuts already. Another service. So now I've explained architecture in, I don't know how much time I spent, less than 30 seconds. Being able to draw so quickly, just opening a URL, no account, no nothing, everything local, is massively powerful. I love TLDraw and Excalidraw for supporting these kind of features. My next tip is using functional music or sound to get you into a focus mode. This isn't for everybody, but for me it really works. It has to be music that isn't distracting you. It has to be music that really focuses you. If it's distracting you, then it doesn't work. Then it's not functioning for its purpose. For me, it's music that doesn't have any vocals. It has to be instrumental, because as soon as I hear people singing or talking, I get distracted. I start listening and paying attention and stuff like that, and I don't want to pay attention to the music. I want to pay attention to what I'm doing. So in the past, I've listened a lot to multi-hour techno sets on SoundCloud without any vocals. They have to be instrumental. But you also have services like musicforprogramming.net, which is not necessarily only for programming, it is for focusing in general. And they have this whole vision on all these different types of, they're not genres, I guess, but I don't know what, maybe they're genres, to really get you into the mood. And they have a whole vision around this. Alternatively, there's things like rainy mood. It may sound silly, but simply having rain sounds also relaxes you and increases focus. The next time you listen to music while working, make sure you pay attention to whether you are being distracted by it. When I figured out, this was years ago, that I was being distracted by a specific type of music, which turned out to be any vocals, then I stopped listening to vocals at all, and my productivity skyrocketed because I suddenly was not distracted anymore. And the insight here is that you should start paying attention to what music is distracting to you. When you start listening to music while you're working, anytime you get distracted, make sure you have this trigger. Wait, now I'm out of my zone because I heard this thing in the music and it got me out of my focus. Now I'm thinking about this, now I'm doing that. Now I'm suddenly urged to take up my phone and start scrolling social media. If that kind of thing happens, pay attention and reverse engineer what the thing was that got you out of your focus. I have a bonus tip, a website blocker. We all have this sometimes, a short, weak moment of the mind where we're trying to get some work done and suddenly we're off. We're scrolling through endless distractions, procrastinating. This can take 10 minutes, half an hour, sometimes even an hour. There's an easy fix. Increase the barrier of entry. There's simple extensions or apps you can install that every time you open Twitter, Facebook, or whatever your distracting website or app is, that is just, you're being denied entry. Increasing the barrier of entry, requiring you to type a password before you're allowing yourself on this website, suddenly makes you realize, do I really want to do this? No, never mind, I'll get back to work. Increasing the barrier of entry is just this 1 second of extra brain time that you need. When you need to type your password to open a specific distraction like social media, this 1 second is all your brain needs to get you back on track, to ask yourself the question, do I really want to do this? No, I've said to myself, I've made this agreement with myself, I'm not going to be distracted while I'm doing the Pomodoros, for example. Or you've turned out to not be doing the Pomodoros and you forgot about it for today and you realize, oh, I've been working for multiple hours, I'm tired, I should take a break. And that's still a better thing, taking a functional break, than going on a distraction procrastination cycle. Personally, I use Blocksite, which is an extension for all the browsers out there. There's also apps like Cold Turkey, which would literally install a local app onto your computer, and it would prevent you from also opening apps. Blocksite, of course, does only websites. I'm not really distracted myself by anything locally on my computer. It's only websites, so it's easy to just have a bunch of URLs in there that it will block for me. Every time I open such a website now, it will just give me this website, hey, you need to enter a password, or I am not allowing this thing to happen. For everybody, it's different things that they do, and you need to figure out what apps or websites you are visiting when you are stuck, bored, or procrastinating. Because if you have that list of things, you can start uninstalling, blocking temporarily during certain time frames, or whatever you want to use. There's lots of free apps out there that allow you to do this. You don't have to pay for this, you don't have to do a lot of research. Just start with something. To summarize, being productive is 2 things for me. It's focus and it's automation. Focus is achieved through minimalism. Think of using that website blocker extension, putting your phone and your laptop on do not disturb mode, using a Pomodoro timer to make sure you have enough breaks and you have sustainable work blocks. And automation is done through tooling. It's asking yourself the question, what activities that I do, if I look at my day, take too long? What small things that happen throughout the day, for which of those do I not need my brain? I'm just doing them because I always do them this way. How can we lower friction for those tasks? Sometimes it's aligning windows neatly side by side, and sometimes it's running git pull and npm install on 5 different repositories. Script it. The trick is to remove friction for common tasks to increase focus. Anything you don't need to use your brain for, if you can automate that away, if you can make it easier, your life will be happier. You will have a higher job satisfaction. And on the other hand, increasing friction for distractions, like that block site extension that gives you a password prompt if you want to open a certain social media site. I challenge you to sit down. Think of what distracts you. What things of your job do you dislike? And then try and make life easier for yourself. You're worth it. And that's it. I hope this was helpful. I hope you liked it. If you have any thoughts or if you want me to make a specific video in the future, please let me know in the comments and subscribe. Thank you very much for watching.